Nightfall in Fern Valley. As the sun dipped behind the rolling hills, Fern Valley began its gentle surrender to twilight. A hush fell over the land, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of an evening bird. The valley, nestled between two ancient forests, was bathed in golden light that slowly faded into dusky lavender. Shadows stretched long across the fields where wildflowers closed their petals and tall grasses swayed in the cooling breeze. At the heart of the valley stood a cluster of old stone cottages, their chimneys beginning to release thin trails of smoke that curled lazily into the evening sky. Tiny lanterns flickered to life in the windows, casting warm glows against worn wooden shutters and ivy-covered walls. It was a village small enough to be forgotten by maps, but known intimately by those who called it home. An old cobblestone path wound through the village center, past the quiet well and under the bowed limbs of a massive elder tree. Beneath that tree, as she did every evening, sat Maeve, the village candlemaker, her weathered hands resting in her lap as she watched the sky change colors. Her small dog, Bramble, lay at her feet, already half asleep. The light of dusk reflected in her gray eyes, and she hummed softly, a tune only the wind seemed to recognize. Further down the lane, a boy named Elliot stood at the edge of the fern-lined stream, skipping stones across the calm surface. The ferns that gave the valley its name curled gently in the growing shadows, their delicate fronds swaying with each passing breeze. Fireflies began to blink awake in the tall reeds, their glow slow and steady, like the breath of the earth itself. As night deepened, the sky turned a shade of deep blue velvet. Stars began to reveal themselves one by one, their light subtle but persistent. Somewhere on the ridge, an owl called out, a long, low note that echoed softly down through the trees, creating a mosaic of light and dark that whispered stories of ages past. Beneath the trees, the soft beds of fallen leaves cushioned the footsteps of wandering deer and foxes who prowled quietly under the watchful eyes of the stars, their presence as natural and necessary as the breath of the earth itself. In the village square, the old stone well remained still and dignified, bathed in the gentle silver glow. Ivy crept along its sides, dew clinging to delicate leaves like tiny gems. The well had been a gathering place for generations, a silent witness to countless days of laughter, tears, celebration, and quiet reflection. Tonight, it stood as a testament to the enduring spirit of the community, a symbol of life's continuous flow, much like the river it overlooked. The chapel's doors were closed, but inside, the warm glow of a single candle burned steadily on the altar, its flame unwavering against the darkness. The scent of beeswax and old wood mingled with the quiet prayers whispered throughout the centuries, prayers of hope, gratitude, and peace. Though empty of people in this hour, the chapel seemed alive with a sacred energy, a silent guardian watching over the village as it dreamed. Throughout Fern Valley, every home, every heart, and every living thing rested within the embrace of night's gentle arms. The cycle of days and nights, seasons and years, wove together endlessly, a tapestry of existence marked by harmony, patience, and love. Here, in this place cradled by hills and rivers, life moved not in hurried beats but in steady, flowing rhythms. It was a place where the soul could breathe freely, where time softened its edges, and where every breath was a quiet prayer. And as the valley slept beneath the boundless sky, the river continued its endless journey, carrying with it the whispered dreams of its people, the memories of those who had walked these paths, and the gentle promise of tomorrow's dawn. The stars watched silently, their light a constant, was a sanctuary of warmth and calm. Inside, the hearth's last embers glowed faintly beneath the ashes, the gentle crackle now silenced in favor of the quiet hum of the night. On her worn wooden table lay an open book of herbs and remedies, its pages yellowed and delicate, touched by time and loving hands. Maeve herself sat in a rocking chair, wrapped in a knitted shawl, eyes closed as she breathed slowly and deeply, her spirit entwined with the pulse of the valley around her. Though asleep, her heart remained open, listening, feeling, resting in the peace she had cultivated through years of gentle care. Not far away, Elliot lay beneath the willow tree by the riverbank, his body curled in a comfortable crescent atop a blanket of soft moss and cool grass. His wooden flute rested beside him, silent for now, but still alive in his dreams where melodies floated like silver threads woven into the fabric of night. His chest rose and fell with the rhythm of the river itself, steady and calm. The willow's slender branches arched protectively overhead, their leaves murmuring lullabies in the breeze, swaying gently in unison with the flowing water. The river moved with a timeless grace, its waters carrying moonlight like liquid silk. It flowed quietly past smooth stones and mossy banks, where fireflies danced in golden bursts, their tiny lights flickering like stars fallen to earth. The gentle sound of the current, the soft splash of water against roots and rocks, blended seamlessly with the symphony of night, the distant call of an owl, the chirp of crickets nestled among the grass, the rustle of small creatures moving softly in the underbrush. Further along, the forest stood as a sentinel of peace and patience. Ancient trees reached skyward, their bark rugged and worn, their branches entwined in a vast, leafy cathedral that sheltered the sleeping world beneath. The shadows cast by the moonlight moved slowly across the forest floor, shifting as if alive. As the night deepened, Fern Valley lay swathed in a vast, tranquil stillness that seemed to stretch beyond the very edges of the world. The river, forever flowing, whispered its ancient song beneath the watchful gaze of the stars, carrying with it the secrets and dreams of all who had ever called this place home. Each gentle ripple told stories older than time itself, murmurs of seasons past, of laughter and tears, of lives lived in quiet harmony with the land. The sky above was a tapestry of celestial light, constellations shifting ever so slowly in their eternal dance. The silver moon hung low and luminous, casting a serene glow that wrapped the valley in a blanket of soft illumination. Its light sifted through the branches of towering oaks and willows, painting patterns of shadow and shimmer upon the earth, upon the flowing waters, upon the rooftops of cottages nestled like precious gems amid fields and gardens. Every leaf, every blade of grass, every stone seemed to hold a gentle glow, as if touched by some sacred blessing. The air was cool and fragrant, alive with the subtle sense of night-blooming flowers, delicate jasmine, sweet honeysuckle, and tender lavender, all mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil and fallen leaves. A light breeze stirred, weaving through the trees and over the fields, carrying with it the soft rustling whispers of the forest, the occasional flutter of moth wings, the quiet exhalations of the earth as it rested beneath the moonlight. In the heart of the village, all was still. The cottages stood in silent repose, their windows aglow with the faint flicker of candlelight, casting warm amber hues against the cool night. Curtains swayed gently as the breeze slipped in and out, carrying with it the muted sounds of peaceful slumber, steady breathing, the occasional sigh, the soft murmur of dreams unfolding in the quiet minds of those who had found rest. Maeve's cottage, perched at the edge of the village near the wildflower meadow, losing its sharp edges, becoming a soft and endless now. Farther along the winding trails, shadows shifted softly as the night animals stirred. A pair of deer stepped cautiously from the woods, their eyes bright and curious. They paused at the water's edge, dipping their noses to drink the cool river before melting silently back into the trees. The forest, too, breathed with a calm that matched the village, timeless, patient, and serene. The gentle hum of nature's night chorus filled the air, the rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind, the faint splash of water as a fish broke the river's surface. These were the sounds that cradled Fern Valley to sleep, the ancient song that had lulled countless generations into rest. Inside the village chapel, a single candle flickered softly on the altar, its flame a steadfast guardian against the darkness. The scent of beeswax and old wood filled the quiet space, mingling with the stillness like a gentle prayer. Though empty of people at this late hour, the chapel seemed alive with the memories of whispered hopes and grateful hearts, a sacred sanctuary within the village's embrace. Outside, the lanterns hanging along the village paths cast pools of warm light, guiding the way for any late wanderers and comforting the shadows that stretched long beneath the trees. Their gentle glow reflected in small puddles from an earlier rain, creating twinkling mirrors that captured fragments of the starry sky. In this moment, Fern Valley existed in perfect harmony, a place where the natural world and human hearts beat in unison, where time softened into a tender embrace, and where dreams could float freely on the river's endless flow. And as the night deepened, A sense of timeless peace settled over the valley, a quiet promise that, no matter what days might come, the river would continue its song, the stars would keep their watch, and the village would rest cradled in the gentle arms of the earth. Their chirps turning into occasional delicate notes that faded into the night. Along the river's edge, Elliot lay beneath the willow's graceful branches, his wooden flute resting by his side. His eyes traced the dance of stars overhead, the constellations shifting slowly across the velvet sky. The cool grass beneath him felt like a soft cushion, and the gentle rustling of leaves whispered ancient lullabies. With a deep breath, he closed his eyes and let the melody of the night seep into his dreams, a melody carried on the river's endless song. In the village square, the old stone well stood silent and serene, bathed in the pale light of the moon. Ivy clung to its sides, delicate leaves shimmering with dew. It was here that many had once gathered, families sharing stories, neighbors exchanging smiles, children chasing fireflies beneath the summer sky. Now, under the blanket of night, the well held its own quiet vigil, a silent witness to the passage of time and the constancy of the village's heart. The air was filled with a comforting stillness, broken only by the occasional flutter of wings as a night bird settled into its nest, or the distant croak of frogs hidden in the reeds. The scent of lavender and chamomile lingered in the breeze, drawn from the small herb gardens tucked behind cottages, offering a gentle invitation to rest and renewal. In one of those cottages, a mother cradled her newborn child, humming softly as she rocked back and forth. Her voice was a quiet song, woven with love and hope, a promise of safety and peace. The baby's breath slowed and deepened, lulled by the warmth of the home and the endless comfort of the night. As the hours passed, the moon traced its path slowly across the sky, bathing the valley in silver light that shimmered on the river's surface and kissed the tops of the ancient oaks. Stars twinkled like scattered gems, their light reaching down to bless the sleeping village below. Time seemed to fold inward. And so Fern Valley rested once more, cradled by the earth and sky, wrapped in stillness and light, ready to awaken to the promise of a new day. Sakuzinya Satilari Ada Bildajan Kata Devam. ChatGPT. Beneath the vast canopy of stars, Fern Valley lay wrapped in a deep and tranquil slumber, as if the very earth itself had drawn a soft breath and settled into a peaceful rest. The gentle murmur of the river flowed like a tender lullaby, weaving through the quiet village and beyond into the embrace of the surrounding hills. Every leaf, every blade of grass, every stone seemed to hold its breath, cradled by the night's calm. The air was cool and sweet with the scent of wild herbs and damp earth, carried on a breeze so light it barely stirred the willow branches that arched over the riverbank. Maeve, the village herbalist, sat quietly by her window, a faint glow from a flickering candle casting shadows across the worn pages of her book. Her hands rested gently on the windowsill, feeling the coolness of the night air as she listened to the whispers of the valley. The soft sounds of distant owl calls mingled with the rustle of leaves, composing a melody of peace and stillness that had cradled this land for generations. She thought of the people who had walked these paths before her, of stories told beneath these very stars, and of the steady rhythm of life that had never hurried or rushed, but flowed like the river that wound its way through the heart of Fern Valley. Outside, the animals had settled for the night. The sheep huddled close together in the meadows, their soft breaths misting in the cool air. A lone fox, its coat a rich auburn under the moonlight, padded silently through the underbrush before curling into a small ball beneath a thicket of brambles. Cats stretched on warm stone walls, their eyes slowly closing as they surrendered to sleep. Even the crickets, who had sung all evening, began to quiet. Village rooftops with gentle light. The breeze stirred the tall grasses in the meadows, carrying with it the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers and ripening fruit. Birds soared lazily overhead, their calls blending softly with the distant murmur of the river winding its way through the land. In the village square, a few villagers gathered beneath the shade of the ancient oak tree. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing stories and news while children played quietly nearby, their laughter light and carefree. The cobblestones beneath their feet were cool, worn smooth by years of footsteps, each stone holding its own silent history. Maeve tended to her garden, carefully pruning the herbs and flowers that thrived in the rich soil. Her hands moved with practiced ease, each touch gentle and deliberate, as if she were coaxing life from the earth itself. The soft rustle of leaves and the faint hum of bees created a soothing symphony around her. Near the riverbank, Elliot sat beneath the willow tree, his wooden flute resting in his lap. He watched the sunlight dance on the water's surface, catching glimpses of fish darting through the clear depths. A small boat floated lazily nearby, tethered to a post, rocking gently with the current. Elliot's thoughts wandered like the river, flowing freely and peacefully. The villagers moved through their afternoon chores with a calm rhythm, their actions measured and unhurried. Baskets of freshly picked fruit were carried to the market, laundry hung to dry in the soft breeze, and meals prepared with care and gratitude. There was a deep sense of connection here, between people, land, and time, that filled the air with a quiet contentment. As the day began to wane, the sky shifted to hues of pink and lavender, signaling the approach of evening. The first stars appeared, twinkling faintly against the deepening blue. Lanterns were lit, casting warm pools of light along the winding paths and through open windows. In the distance, the river's gentle song continued, a timeless lullaby weaving through the valley. Its steady flow carried the stories, dreams, and hopes of Fern Valley's people, binding them together in a tapestry of peace and belonging. And as night fell once more, the village settled into a restful embrace, ready to welcome the quiet dreams that would carry them through till dawn. As twilight deepened, the village of Fern Valley settled into a calm hush, the sounds of the day giving way to the gentle whispers of night. Soft lantern lights spilled from cottage windows, casting golden pools onto cobblestone paths where shadows danced quietly in the cool evening air. Maeve wrapped a woolen shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside, breathing in the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers. Her footsteps led her toward the river, where the water shimmered beneath the rising moon, its surface reflecting silver threads of starlight. She paused beneath the willow tree, its branches swaying gently as if greeting an old friend. Nearby, Elliot lay on a soft patch of grass, his wooden flute cradled loosely in his hands. He gazed upward, tracing constellations slowly turning across the sky. A cool breeze ruffled his hair, carrying the faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. The melody he played earlier still echoed softly in his mind, blending with the peaceful sounds of the valley at rest. Back in the village, families gathered in quiet rooms, their voices low and tender. Children drifted to sleep beneath warm quilts, their breaths deep and steady. The comforting murmur of whispered prayers and gentle lullabies wove through the night air, wrapping the village in a blanket of love and safety. The river's song grew softer, a lullaby that carried on the breeze, soothing and eternal. Stars blinked above like watchful eyes, guarding dreams and secrets as the world turned slowly toward dawn. Reading passages softly aloud to herself, stories of long ago, of ancestors and traditions, of the very soil beneath their feet. The river, ever present, whispered its way through the valley, its clear waters reflecting the blue of the sky and the fluttering leaves above. Occasionally, a fish broke the surface, sending ripples outward that shimmered like silver threads. Along its banks, wildflowers nodded gently in the breeze, lavender, daisies, and a scattering of bright red poppies. Elliot, the young boy, had returned to the willow tree by the river's edge, his small basket now filled with wildflowers, herbs, and a few smooth stones collected during his morning wander. He sat quietly beneath the drooping branches, lifting his wooden flute to his lips. The notes he played were soft and slow, weaving through the valley like a gentle breath, calling the earth and sky to listen. The villagers' day continued in this unhurried rhythm, marked not by clocks or alarms but by the natural cadence of life, the rising and setting of the sun, the flow of the river, the growth of the fields. Meals were prepared with care and shared with gratitude, chores were completed with mindful attention, stories and laughter filled the air, low and comforting. As the sun reached its highest point, casting warm light over the village and its surrounding hills, a peaceful hush settled once more. It was the moment of rest, the gentle pause before the afternoon's work and play. The shadows under the trees stretched longer, and the breeze carried the faint scent of freshly baked bread and blooming flowers. And so the day in Fern Valley moved forward, steady, calm, and filled with quiet wonder. Time here was not measured by rush or demand, but by the deep, unspoken harmony between the land and its people, a harmony that had lasted through generations and would continue long into the future. The afternoon sun cast a warm, golden glow across Fern Valley, painting the rolling fields and their songs delicate and varied, a lullaby for the waking earth. The gentle hum of bees could be heard as they visited blooming clover and wild thyme, moving steadily from flower to flower. Down in the village, the pace remained unhurried, deliberate, and filled with quiet grace. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, mingling with the mist that still lingered low in the valleys and hollows. The sound of footsteps on cobblestones was soft, measured, as villagers went about their morning routines. Jonah, the baker, had begun his day early, kneading dough with practiced hands that bore the marks of years of work. The warmth of the oven seeped through the bakery's wooden walls, carrying the rich aroma of bread, honey, and cinnamon into the cool morning air. He paused briefly to gaze out the window at the sleepy village, his heart swelling with contentment. In a small garden behind one of the cottages, Lynn tended to her herbs, gently brushing leaves to check for dew or pests. She hummed a soft tune, one passed down through generations, the melody rising and falling like the gentle river nearby. Her hands moved with care, as if speaking a silent language to the plants themselves. Children gathered by the village square, their laughter light and innocent, chasing each other around the old oak tree. Their cheeks were rosy from the chill, their breath visible in the air like tiny clouds. They paused now and then to catch their breath, eyes wide and sparkling with joy. They played with simple toys carved from wood, or chased after butterflies that floated lazily in the sunbeams. Nearby, old Maeve sat on a bench beneath the porch of her cottage, a shawl wrapped snugly around her shoulders. She watched the village with a serene smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she took in the peaceful scene. In her hands she held a worn leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and soft with age. Occasionally, she turned a page. In the village, windows opened quietly, shutters creaked as they were drawn back, and the scent of fresh bread mingled with the cool morning breeze. Children's laughter, soft and tentative, echoed down winding lanes as they stepped outside, their eyes still heavy with sleep but bright with the promise of a new day. Maeve moved with calm purpose through her small kitchen, preparing tea and arranging fresh herbs on the windowsill. She paused to watch the lights spill over the rooftops, warming stone and wood alike. The river sparkled in the distance, its surface alive with the gentle dance of morning light and shadow. Elliot, the boy by the stream, had already returned to the willow tree, this time with a small basket of wild flowers and a wooden flute carved with care. He sat beneath the drooping branches, breathing in the cool, fragrant air as he began to play, a slow, melodic tune that drifted through the valley like a whispered greeting to the new day. The village breathed in unison, slow and steady, embracing the seamless shift from night to day. There was no hurry, no rush, only the quiet assurance that all was as it should be. Time here moved like the river, constant, calm, and endlessly flowing. And as the sun climbed higher, warming the earth and filling the sky with light, Fern Valley awoke fully, bathed in peace, wrapped in gentle rhythm, ready for whatever dreams the day might bring. ChatGPT. The morning in Fern Valley unfurled slowly, like a soft blanket being gently pulled away to reveal the world beneath. The sun's rays, pale at first, filtered through the leaves of towering oaks and maples, casting dappled patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. Every leaf seemed to shimmer with a fresh coating of dew, tiny jewels sparkling in the cool air. The air itself was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. Birds flitted from branch to branch, like a soft blanket. In the heart of the village, the ancient oak tree stood tall and silent, its gnarled branches stretching wide as if to cradle the stars themselves. Beneath its sheltering limbs, the villagers' memories seemed to gather, whispered stories told by grandparents, laughter shared on summer evenings, the quiet resilience of those who had tended this land for generations. Farther along the riverbank, a lone fisherman named Eamon sat quietly in his small boat, his eyes closed as he breathed in the night air. The water lapped gently against the sides of the vessel, its rhythm matching the steady beat of his heart. Though he had caught little this evening, there was no hurry, no frustration, only the deep peace of being surrounded by nature's embrace. A soft rustle in the underbrush drew his attention briefly, and he glimpsed a pair of glowing eyes, a fox passing silently on its nightly rounds. Eamon smiled softly, tipping his hat in silent greeting before settling back into his quiet vigil. Back in the village, the faint glow of lanterns flickered through windows, casting warm pools of light onto cobblestone streets. The gentle murmur of whispered prayers and lullabies floated through the air, weaving a tapestry of comfort and calm. Even the old chapel, its stone walls worn smooth by centuries, seemed to hum softly in the night's embrace. As the hours slipped by, the valley breathed deeply in its sleep. The stars moved slowly overhead, the moon traced its path across the sky, and the river carried the dreams of Fern Valley onward, a timeless lullaby for all who called this peaceful place home. Beneath the soft glow of dawn, Fern Valley stirred gently as if awakening from a deep, restful dream. The mist that had embraced the night lifted slowly, revealing dew-kissed fields stretching out like a quilt of green and gold. Birds began their morning songs, a tender chorus that threaded through the air, weaving life back into the stillness. The children younger, the voices louder. And yet, it was still the same in its soul. It had always breathed in peace. It had always welcomed night like a friend. Further down the lane, in the cottage with ivy climbing the walls, Wren slept beside a bundle of wildflowers she had gathered just before twilight. Their fragrance still lingered in the air, faint chamomile, lemon balm, and something else, soft and sweet like memory. Her dreams were filled with green fields and floating petals, with laughter and river mist and the sound of her grandmother's voice, humming a tune with no words. The village itself seemed to dream now. The cobblestone paths, the stone fences, the crooked weather vanes, they rested in the silence. Even the trees leaned in, their branches still, their leaves glistening with the shimmer of moon-kissed dew. Above, the stars turned slowly in their ancient dance. Constellations drifted from one end of the sky to the other, as they had every night for centuries, watching over the same hills, the same water, the same quiet lives. Time moved gently here, like the tide of a lake or the pages of an old book turned by a sleepy hand. In a cottage near the edge of the woods, a cat jumped onto the windowsill and curled into a circle of shadow and fur. It blinked once at the stars, then closed its eyes, purring softly as it joined the valley in its deep slumber. And so Fern Valley slept, not as one, but as many held together by stillness. Each home, each breath, each dream wove together like threads in a quilt, warm and quiet beneath the moon. The river sang, the stars watched, and the valley dreamed. As the night deepened, a gentle fog began to weave itself through the valley, softening the outlines of trees and cottages alike. The cool air carried the scent of damp earth and wildflowers, mingling with the faint trace of wood smoke from last evening's fires. Crickets chirped in rhythm, their song a soothing backdrop to the stillness that wrapped Fern Valley. Lay on his back, looking up through the branches. The stars above twinkled like they had secrets to tell. He listened to the gurgle of water, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of frogs beginning their chorus. And then he closed his eyes, let out a long breath, and allowed himself to drift. And all through Fern Valley, sleep came not with struggle, but with softness. It came with the hush of wind against stone, the weight of a warm quilt, the comfort of a place where nothing needed fixing. It came with the trust that tomorrow would be just as gentle as today had been. And the river, forever singing, carried their dreams downstream, each one a story, a memory, a wish, wrapped in moonlight, guarded by stars. The moon reached its peak above Fern Valley, casting a silvery glow across every rooftop, treetop, and sleeping meadow. Its reflection shimmered on the surface of the river, creating the illusion of a second sky beneath the water, stars above and stars below, cradling the valley in gentle light. On the hillsides, the sheep dozed in clusters, their breaths rising in soft clouds against the cool night air. A fox curled beneath a bush near the orchard wall, his tail wrapped tightly around him as he slumbered. All across the fields and farms, the world was still. Even the wind had quieted to a hush. In a window near the village square, an old clock chimed softly, 3 low tones spaced far apart, like deep breaths in the night. No one stirred. The chimes were not loud enough to wake, only to mark time's slow, steady passage. Inside her cottage, Maeve had returned from the hill and now sat quietly in her rocking chair, a wool blanket tucked over her knees. The candle beside her had burned low, its flame a tiny golden bead. Her eyes were half closed, her mind floating somewhere between thought and dream, where memories blended with the present. She thought of Fern Valley as it once had been, when the trees were smaller. Golden halos cast across wooden floors and stone walls. Shadows stretched long and gentle across gardens and fences, melting into the soft earth. Moths fluttered near candlelit panes, drawn by the hush and the light. On the hillside above the cottages, a narrow footpath curved through the tall grass. Maeve walked there sometimes after supper, a shawl around her shoulders and her lantern in hand. Tonight she walked slowly, the light swinging gently beside her, brushing the tops of the grasses like a firefly in rhythm with her breath. She passed a small stone bench, half hidden by climbing vines, and paused there, gazing out over the valley. Below her, the rooftops shimmered in the moonlight. She could see the gentle flicker of home fires still glowing behind curtains, the outline of the old oak in the square, and the river, ever moving, now like a ribbon of starlight stitched through the land. She sat and closed her eyes, letting the night speak. There was no sound that startled, only those that soothed, the steady hoot of a distant owl, the chirp of insects in the hedges, the soft creak of trees as they swayed beneath the rising moon. It was the symphony of the valley, subtle, patient, and endless. Back in the village, the last of the children were tucked into beds, the scent of lavender and clean linen wrapped around them like a story untold. Some clutched small cloth animals, others listened to the breeze whispering through the shutters. One by one eyelids fell. Dreams crept in like a tide, slow and sure and silver. In the chapel, a single candle remained lit, its flame barely flickering in the stillness. Brother Cadwell had gone to rest, but he always left that light burning through the night. It was not for reading or ritual, it was a quiet promise. That even while they slept, the village was watched over. That even in silence, love remained. Near the river bank, Elliot returned to his usual spot beneath the willow tree. This time, he brought a blanket and the ticking of a small wall clock, and the rustling of dried leaves. She worked slowly, her hands steady, her breath calm. Outside, sunlight spilled in through old, wavy glass, painting soft patterns on the wooden floor. As the afternoon waned, a golden haze settled across the valley. Bees floated lazily between blooms. Curtains swayed in open windows. Cats stretched out on stone steps, their fur glowing in the warm light. And in the distance, where the hills began to fold into one another, a single deer stood still in the shade, watching the village with quiet curiosity before melting back into the trees. Dinner was never loud in Fern Valley. It came in the form of shared bread, fresh berries, warm soup, and the clink of wooden spoons on ceramic bowls. Families gathered under pergolas or inside cool cottages, passing dishes and stories and smiles. Some ate in silence, others in soft conversation. No one rushed to finish. There was no next task pressing in. Only the soft pull of evening. And as the last of the light dipped behind the hills, the lanterns came alive once more, each one lit with care, each one glowing like a star pulled down from the sky. Their warm light shimmered on garden stones and reflected in still puddles left from a distant morning's rain. Above, the stars returned, one by one. No fanfare. No sudden appearance. Just a slow, quiet gathering of light in the deepening sky. The village sighed as one. A sigh of rest. Of completion. Of belonging. And the river, cradling the night once again, began to hum its lullaby under the watching trees. In the hours just after sunset, when the sky turned from dusky rose to deep indigo, Fern Valley took on a glow that felt almost otherworldly. The world no longer moved in steps or seconds, but in slow waves, soft exhalations of quiet, calm air. Everything, every leaf, every stone, every breath, seemed to pause between the ticking of the clock. Windows glowed warmly. Fern Valley was alive, but it did not bustle. It breathed. It whispered. It carried its people forward not with speed, but with steadiness, with the promise that everything would come in its time. And the river, always watching, always moving, continued to sing its ancient lullaby beneath the willow branches. Down by the willow trees, the river widened into a slow, mirror-like bend. The water flowed silently past flat stones and moss-covered roots, its surface broken only by the occasional ripple of a fish beneath or the gliding trail of a drifting leaf. It was here, near this quiet bend, that many villagers came to rest, not to speak, not to think, but simply to be. An elder named Tom sat upon a weathered bench carved long ago from a fallen oak. His walking stick rested across his knees, and a woolen hat shaded his eyes. He came here most afternoons, listening to the rhythm of the river, remembering times both recent and long past. He had learned, like the valley itself, the art of quiet patience. Farther along the banks, the children built tiny boats from bark and twine, whispering wishes to them before setting them adrift. They watched in silent anticipation as each one bobbed gently on the current, some turning in lazy spirals, others gliding straight through the reeds. They giggled without raising their voices, as if the river itself might be sleeping. In the distance, the bell in the chapel tower rang softly, just once, to mark the turning of the sun. Its sound, deep and mellow, rolled across the village and into the hills, folding itself into the very wind. It reminded the villagers not of time to rush, but of time to breathe. It was the sound of peace, steady as the roots beneath their homes. Inside her apothecary, Wren's grandmother sorted herbs into small, hand-sewn pouches. Lavender, valerian root, rose petals, all dried in bundles hanging from the ceiling. The room was filled with the hush of wood and spice. A small gathering of villagers appeared like clockwork, Maeve with her tea, Jonah with a cloth-wrapped parcel of warm bread, and Brother Cadwell with his slow, knowing smile. They did not speak loudly. There was no need. Their companionship was rooted in silence, in presence. They simply sat by the fountain together, watching the sun inch across the rooftops, watching the mist melt from the stones. A cart passed by, pulled by a sleepy pony with ribbons still tied loosely to its mane. The wheel creaked in time with the rhythm of hooves, and the farmer riding atop it lifted a hand in greeting. He wasn't headed anywhere urgent. In Fern Valley, nothing ever really was. Children eventually trickled into the lanes, their small voices rising gently into the morning air. Some carried pails to fetch water, others chased after the fluttering petals that swirled from the village gardens. One boy sat on the low stone wall, humming as he carved a stick into a small flute, each cut slow and careful. He'd seen one in the chapel long ago and was determined to make his own. In the orchard, the trees glistened with morning light. A family moved quietly through the rows, inspecting fruit, brushing leaves, gently speaking to one another. No one rushed. The apples would fall when they were ready. The baskets would fill, just as the sky filled with the scent of blooming clover and honey. And overhead, the clouds moved slowly across the wide sky, shifting shapes in the lazy breeze. They passed without sound, like thoughts floating across a peaceful mind. As midday approached, the rhythm of the village changed only slightly. It did not quicken, it only deepened. The sunlight became warmer, the shadows longer. Meals were shared in gardens and under trees, where cool shades stretched across soft grass. Laughter rose now and then, light and low like ripples across still water. Their soft bleats barely louder than the wind. The meadow beyond the village was lush and golden in the early light, and as the animals wandered toward it, the shepherd followed with calm steps, tapping his staff against the earth. The day had begun in Fern Valley, but not all at once. Like a slow tide, morning moved through the village with softness and grace. It touched each home gently, like a mother waking her children with a whisper. There were no harsh alarms, no sharp sounds. Only the rustling of trees, the murmur of water, the quiet shuffle of feet, and the distant call of birds. And even as the sun rose higher, bringing with it the full colors of day, soft blues, vivid greens, and the golden glow of ripe fields, the quiet of the night remained. It didn't vanish. It stayed within the walls of the cottages, in the folds of blankets, in the curves of steaming teacups. It lingered in the songs of birds and the rhythm of footsteps on earth. In Fern Valley, night and morning were not opposites, They were a seamless melody, one flowing gently into the next. Along the eastern trail, where wild thyme and forget-me-nots lined the path, the light fell through the trees in long golden strands. Dew sparkled on each leaf, like a field of tiny stars left behind by the fading night. The forest breathed in unison with the valley now, slow, deep, calm. Even the wind moved gently through the branches, as if not to disturb the stillness that lingered in the undergrowth. A girl named Wren, who lived near the forest's edge, stepped barefoot onto the path outside her cottage. Her long, dark hair was damp with morning air, and she carried a small woven basket under one arm. With quiet steps she wandered past the fern beds, stopping now and then to gather mushrooms or untangle a wild flower leaning too far across the trail. Birds followed her quietly, as if they too recognized her gentle presence. Back in the village square, the fountain gurgled softly, as it always did. Dew-covered world of Fern Valley. The village rooftops, still cool from the night, gleamed slightly as the sun's warmth reached them. A single bird chirped from a chimney top, and then another joined, and soon a gentle chorus of birdsong rippled through the valley. In her small kitchen, Maeve poured water from her kettle into a clay cup and dropped in a sprig of lemon balm. The scent rose with the steam, bright and calming. She took her tea to the doorway, wrapped in her shawl, and watched as the first true light touched the village square. There was no rush, no frantic schedules, no alarms. The day would begin when it was ready, and so would she. Along the stream, Elliot stirred under his blanket of willow branches. He blinked up at the light through the green canopy above him, not startled or hurried, but gently pulled back into wakefulness by the soft hum of morning. He sat up, rubbed his eyes, and watched as the river caught the sunlight, sending flecks of gold skipping across the surface. His fishing line still lay where he'd dropped it, untouched, but it didn't matter. The stillness had been the true reward. Jonah, the baker, opened his shutters one by one, letting the morning air drift through his flour-dusted shop. He lit the ovens again, kneaded dough with steady hands, and whistled a slow tune passed down from his grandfather. The scent of cinnamon and brown sugar soon filled the air once more, drawing the first curious birds to his windowsill. In another cottage, a mother gently rocked her baby in a wooden cradle. The child had woken just before dawn, not with a cry, but with soft murmurs. Now, back in her arms, the baby's breath slowed again, the soft rhythm matching the rustle of leaves outside. The mother leaned her cheek against the tiny head, closed her eyes for a moment, and smiled. Further up the hill, the village's only shepherd opened his gate and whistled low. A flock of sleepy sheep began to move, their contours softened and smoothed by the dewy air. The trees stood like ancient sentinels, their trunks half swallowed by fog, their branches quietly dripping with moisture collected from the night. A lone lantern, forgotten or perhaps purposefully left lit, glowed at the edge of the square. Its gentle flicker cast long, sleepy shadows across the stone path and over the old well, still bubbling faintly with spring water. Fireflies danced around its light like sparks, weaving slow spirals that vanished into the mist. Atop the ridge, where the forest met the fields and the stars shone clearest, the first hint of dawn began to stain the sky, soft pinks and quiet oranges rising delicately behind the trees. The stars began to blink away one by one, their night's watch ending as the promise of a new day unfurled across the horizon. Maeve stirred in her bed, sensing the change. Her eyes opened not from any sound, but from the familiar rhythm of the earth itself. She rose slowly, lighting a single candle before making her way to the door. She opened it without a creak, stepped out into the mist, and looked to the hills. The sky beyond them glowed faintly, gently, like an ember slowly catching fire. She smiled. Behind her, the village still slept. But soon, the chimneys would puff with new smoke, the bakery would stir with scent, the chapel would open its doors to quiet morning prayer. Children would rise, blinking at the light, and the fields would stretch once more beneath the rising sun. But for now, in this in-between moment, Fern Valley rested, suspended in serenity, held gently in the arms of the last stars and the first breath of morning. And so, another peaceful night in village dreams came quietly to its end, and another peaceful day prepared to begin. As the light of dawn grew stronger, golden rays began to spill over the tops of the hills and into the valley below. The mist slowly lifted like a curtain, revealing the soft, shaping them into gentle things, walking barefoot through tall grass, catching fireflies in glass jars, watching clouds float over wheat fields. A frog croaked nearby, then fell silent again, content with the hush. The hours passed, and the village never hurried. Each home breathed in and out, alive in the stillness. Mothers shifted in their sleep, their arms wrapped around little ones. Grandparents dreamt of younger days and songs half forgotten. The candles in the windows began to burn low, their flames bowing with the breeze but never quite going out. Above all this, the stars turned slowly, watching the valley as they had for thousands of years. Fern Valley was not marked on any map, but the sky knew it well, this tiny, quiet cradle of peace below. And the night, deep and kind, held the valley close in her arms, and whispered, "Sleep now. All is well." In the quiet hours just before dawn, Fern Valley held its stillest breath. The world hovered in that hushed space between night and morning, where everything seemed to pause, waiting. Even the river, ever flowing, moved more gently now, its voice softened to a near whisper as it slid over smooth stones and beneath arched bridges draped in ivy. Inside one of the cottages closest to the stream, a young couple lay curled together beneath a quilt stitched by generations past. The faint crackle of embers in the fireplace was the only sound within their home. On the nearby windowsill, a small wooden toy rested beside a dried lavender bundle, both bathed in the pale silver of moonlight. In the stables, the animals dozed peacefully, hooves shifted softly in straw, ears twitched at dreams. Even the barn cat, usually restless at night, lay still on a warm beam overhead, tail wrapped tight and breath slow and steady. The mist, having rolled down from the high ridge, now draped the entire valley in a silken veil. Fields that had basked in sunlight just hours earlier were now ghosted in silver. Time seemed to slow here, not stop, but soften, like snow melting into a stream or candle wax sinking around a flickering wick. And so, beneath the moon's tender gaze, the village breathed deeply and dreamt on, wrapped in the warmth of stillness, safe in the rhythm of the night. Farther out, where the village paths faded into the open meadow, a soft mist had begun to rise. It crept low across the earth like a slow-moving tide, winding through the heather and clinging gently to fence posts and tree trunks. The moonlight touched it lightly, turning it silver, like spun thread unraveling from the sky itself. A pair of barn owls glided silently over the field, their wings barely stirring the air. They circled above the quiet homes and then disappeared into the treetops, where they would perch until the rustle of something small drew them back into the open. But even the forest was still tonight, as if every creature knew it was a time for rest, not chase. Inside a narrow cottage nestled against a mossy hill, old Harold sat by his window, sipping warm cider from a clay mug. The glass panes were fogged with breath and night air, but he could still make out the shapes of lanterns flickering in the distant homes, each light a small assurance that all was well. He smiled to himself, feeling the familiar ache in his bones not as a burden, but as a reminder that he'd lived another good day. He leaned back in his chair, wrapped in a thick woolen shawl, and closed his eyes. Nearby, the orchard trees whispered to one another in the dark. Their limbs swayed gently, branches laden with late fruit, their roots drinking deeply from the damp soil. The smell of apples and sweet decay hung in the air, mingling with the dew and wood smoke, creating a scent that was uniquely Fern Valley, earthy, calm, ancient. By the river's edge, Elliot had fallen asleep beneath a willow tree, his fishing rod still resting across his lap. The soft gurgle of the stream played at his dreams. From the other side of the valley, where the forest pressed closer to the homes, came the faint rhythmic thud of hooves. An old mare named Willow was returning from the pasture, guided by instinct more than sight. Her coat shimmered pale silver in the moonlight as she trotted past rows of sleeping garden beds and came to rest near her stable. She gave a low huff and settled down into the straw, her breath warm against the cool night air. Above the cottages, the stars grew brighter. The constellations stretched lazily across the sky, Orion just clearing the ridge, and Cassiopeia reclining in her celestial throne. The villagers, though many too tired to name the stars, felt their comfort. It was as if the heavens were watching over Fern Valley with ancient, unspoken care. In the village square, the fountain at the center of the well trickled on, its gentle stream catching the silver of moonlight. No one used the well much these days, but no one had the heart to stop it either. It had been part of the village for longer than any memory. A few petals from the evening primroses had fallen into the water, floating like tiny boats adrift in a quiet sea. Old Maeve, who had returned to her cottage by now, lit a final candle and placed it in her window. It flickered gently, joining dozens of others across the village, tiny beacons glowing softly in the dark, like earthbound stars. She lay down in her bed with a sigh, listening to the wind rustle the thatch above, and let her eyes drift closed. And still the night deepened. Foxes moved silently through the tall grass. Mice scurried under garden sheds. The trees creaked gently as if stretching in their sleep. And above it all, the river hummed, a steady, ancient song that had shaped the valley long before the first stones were laid or names were spoken. In Fern Valley, no dream was hurried, and no moment was wasted. The first signs of night were not frightening in Fern Valley. They were welcomed, cherished even, like an old friend returning after a long day. In the bakery, the last loaves cooled on the windowsill, their scent mingling with the distant aroma of fresh herbs from the apothecary next door. The baker, Jonah, wiped his hands on his apron and looked outside with a satisfied sigh. The light from his kitchen spilled out onto the path, inviting and warm. From every home came the quiet rituals of evening, shutters being drawn, candles being lit, books opened beside steaming cups of tea. A violin began to play from the small house near the orchard, its notes clear and slow, drifting through the valley like mist. And as the moon rose, full and soft above the hills, Fern Valley exhaled. The day had ended, and the night had arrived, not with noise or chaos, but with peace. A hush that covered the village like a blanket, tucking it in under the watchful eyes of the stars. A light wind swept down from the hills, winding gently through the trees and whispering along the rooftops. The tall grasses swayed in reply, brushing softly against the old stone fences that marked the edges of garden plots and pastures. In the hush of nightfall, the valley seemed to hold its breath, as though listening for something sacred in the stillness. Inside a small cottage near the eastern edge of the village, a young woman named Lynn sat by the hearth, her chair creaking softly as she rocked back and forth with her sleeping baby in her arms. The fire crackled low, casting a golden halo around them as shadows danced lazily across the walls. A woven basket of herbs rested beside her, half filled from that morning's foraging in the woods. The scent of chamomile and mint lingered in the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of the baby's breath. Unwavering presence in the vast night, shining like distant beacons of hope and serenity. In this moment, Fern Valley existed as a living lullaby, a place where peace was not just a fleeting feeling but a way of being. It was a place where the earth sang softly to the sky, where the wind carried stories from one generation to the next, and where the heart found rest within the steady beat of life itself. So let the river's song carry you now, gentle listener, into the calm embrace of sleep. Let the soft murmur of leaves, the distant call of owls, and the shimmering dance of moonlight guide your dreams. Here, in the quiet sanctuary of Fern Valley, all is well. All is as it should be. And as the stars keep their watch and the river hums its timeless lullaby, may your heart find peace, your mind find rest, and your soul find home. Sleep now, beneath the whispering trees and starlit skies. Sleep with the knowledge that you are part of this endless, beautiful rhythm, that you are held, safe and sound, within the gentle arms of the earth. And when the morning light stretches across the hills once more, it will bring with it new dreams, new hope, and the promise of a day filled with quiet wonder. Good night, dear one. Rest well. The valley sleeps with you. The end.